Welcome to our new program with the False Friends of Fatima. We're with Christopher Ferrara, the author of the book, False Friends of Fatima. Welcome back to our program, Christopher.
Thanks for having me, Father. It's a great opportunity to discuss this book about this whole phenomenon of the False Friends of Fatima. And I think you were mentioning in our preparatory discussion that we would talk today about some of these false friends who operate in the lower level of the church. In the last segment, we talked about how this party line is being imposed from on high by the Secretary of State, but there are people on the bottom who are promoting it from below.
Not just the Secretary of State, Cardinal Bertone today, but before him, Cardinal Sudano, before him, Cardinal Casaroli. But so it's imposed from the top, led from the top, but at the same time, they can't do it by themselves. They need to have other people cooperating with them to make it believable to the common man, to the faithful.
The party needs rank and file party members to carry out the party line. Yeah. Now, we mentioned in the previous segment something that happened with the Blue Army around 1982 to 1984. We mentioned Bishop Hastrich said that, well, it's no longer appropriate to pray publicly for the consecration of Russia because this would upset the Vatican's efforts to control diplomatic relations.
The so-called Blue Army, which is the Blue Army of Lady of Fatima, which would be their title, pretending to be friends of Our Lady of Fatima. And I'm sure there are many good people in the rank and file of the Blue Army, but you have the leadership saying we should not pray for the consecration of Russia when Our Lady of Fatima precisely asked for the consecration of Russia. And of course, if we can't do it ourselves, at least we should pray for this to be taking place. But here you have the President of the Blue Army in the United States saying, don't pray for the Blue Army for the consecration of Russia.
Yeah, in fact, he said that it would be like waving a red flag in front of a bull. Now let's consider that. What he's really saying is that Our Lady, seat of wisdom, the Mother of God, came down to earth and recklessly prescribed waving a red flag in front of a bull. This is how these people think. Do they really even believe that Our Lady is the seat of wisdom and that, in fact, she's the Mother of God?
And do they believe even that Our Lady came and asked for this consecration? While they pretend to believe, do they really believe in the first place?
Yeah, according to them, the message of Fatima should be something like, I will come to ask for the waving of a red flag in front of a bull. That's how they view the message of Fatima.
So what they did then in 82, the Pope John Paul II went to Fatima and he consecrated the world the year after he was, on the day after he was shot, anniversary year, on May 13th, he consecrated the world, not Russia. So then the Blue Army in North America, John Hafford published the Soul magazine from an anonymous writer, which turns out to be the TFP, the Tradition Family Property, Jose Lucia Correa. I met the man. I was at their miselection of 1981 of the new president of the Blue Army being Bishop Luna. And I met Jose, so I knew it was him who wrote it because they said it was someone who was like a family member of Sister Lucy. Well, he had told us that at the meeting the year before that he was a lawyer and he had worked out the adoption of one of Sister Lucy's grand nephews, I think it was, in Brazil. He was from Brazil. And so he was considered as if he were a member of Lucy's family as a result of facilitating this adoption. And so he went to speak to Sister Lucy on or about May 13th, it could have been the 14th or 15th. He went there after the Pope consecrated the world, and he claimed that Sister Lucy said that the consecration is done. Now, Sister Lucy never said that, but John Hafford foolishly, recklessly went ahead and published this information, this apparent information, and that's how I started to get interested in this whole thing, because at the same time, Hamish Fraser of Scotland said that this information is completely wrong, it wasn't the consecration of Russia. And so the Blue Army stood by their guns, so I investigated the matter, published our own findings on it, and they still insisted. So then Father Caillon from France, Father Pierre Caillon, spoke to Dr. Lacerda, who went with the papal nuncio to Sister Lucy on March 19th, 1983. And Lucy was asked directly by the papal nuncio, did the consecration of 1982 fulfill Our Lady of Fatima's request? And she said, no, it did not. And for two reasons. One, because Russia was not mentioned in the consecration, and two, because the bishops did not join in. So the Blue Army then, in 1983, backpedaled and said, well, we were completely wrong, but Russia still has to be consecrated. It's the only thing that they were wrong. It was the one thing they reported. So they backpedaled in 83. But in 84, they came back with the same story again, that when the Pope did the consecration of the world, essentially the same as what he did in 82, the Blue Army again came out saying the consecration is done. And so finally, they weren't accepting any corrections this time. So I let Father Kramer write an article, 2 articles, in fact, to prove that they were falsifying the message. Yeah, and Father Kramer pointed out that they actually changed Our Lady's words to say, Our Lady at Fatima came to ask the consecration of the world. And Father Paul rightly demolished them for saying, look, they're falsifying the message in order to please the Vatican-Moscow agreement, but they're not doing it to please Our Lady, not doing it in obedience to Our Lady of Fatima.
Your comments just now suggested another absurdity in their position. First, there was the consecration of the world, which they proclaimed to be a consecration of Russia. Sister Lucia says, no, that wasn't a consecration of Russia, because Russia wasn't mentioned. So then the Blue Army says, oh, well, I guess we were mistaken about only one thing, that Russia wasn't consecrated. So then there's another ceremony in 1984, which is again a consecration of the world with no mention of Russia. It's the same ceremony in essence. So why would they again proclaim the same mistaken position they had proclaimed back in 1982? What's the difference? It's the same. It's like Mark Fellows says in his book on Fatima and Twilight. What they're saying is if you hit a series of doubles, that's a home run.
Yeah.
No, it's not good enough. To hit a home run, you've got to reach the stands.
Yeah.
You've got to do what Our Lady requested in order to accomplish what she prescribed, which is a consecration of Russia, which involves mentioning the place.
Yeah.
How do you consecrate a place without mentioning it?
After consecration, the word means to set aside this. If this were a chalice, which is not, and the bishop consecrates a chalice, then it's set aside for the exclusive use of religious purposes. But it's this one, it's not that one. You consecrate something individually to set it aside from the rest of its service. So Russia has to be consecrated individually as a country to the service of the Immaculate Heart of Mary.
I have a running joke about this. They've consecrated the world in 1982, the world in 1984. In 2000, they consecrated the unemployed, the sick, youth in search of meaning.
I think it was pizza makers as well.
The pizza makers, So at this point, why don't they just conduct an omnibus ceremony that would consecrate absolutely every blessed thing on the face of the earth except Russia? Get it over with. Yeah. Because apparently, because of the party line being rigorously enforced, there has been a determination that never, under any circumstances, will Russia be consecrated by name. Why not? It's ridiculous.
But of course, the anti-Catholic party, the party of the innovators, has solid reasons. They want to destroy the church as it was and remake it in their own image. They're doing the bidding of the Masons to kill the church, to have it integrated with the one new world order and one new world government.
Well, you mentioned before that in the 1980s, as part of this effort to rewrite the message of Fatima, certain rather strange typewritten or computer-generated letters began to appear.
Well, first of all, just going through I'll get right to it, Chris. First of all, you have the Consecration 82. The Blue Army says it was done. Consecration of Russia. We prove it's wrong. They backpedal. Father Caio proves it wrong. Sister Lucy's quoted. She's not able to speak, but in this case, the people who went there, so they couldn't deny her words. In 84, it's the same thing. Then for the next 2 or 3 years, the Blue Army is making the same story. We demolish them with the truth. So Father Fox goes off. The Blue Army quiets down his message. They've been discredited. And Father Fox starts up his own new magazine, and he starts up with the same party line. But by 89, then to get to your point, which is, obviously, they weren't able to carry the day with the troops ahead in Washington, D.C., in Washington, New Jersey, or with Father Fox over in South Dakota. So they came with a new ploy to have some letters that Sister Lucy signs. In 89, the first time, and this only happened after there was a word came down from the Vatican in, I think it was June, July, August of 89, which said, everyone must think and say that the consecration is done. This is the word. Father Caio mentioned this, and it's mentioned in our book.
C-A-I-L-L-O-N, Father Caio.
Yes. And then when they changed the nuncio, because the papal nuncio after the one from 84 died 6 days after the consecration of the world on March 25th, 84, he died 6 days later. The new nuncio did not want to talk to Sister Lucy, didn't want to have anything to do with it. He wouldn't lend himself to one or the other. He just kept to his own self on the question of Fatima, the papal nuncio to Portugal. In 89, he was replaced by a new nuncio. After the new nuncio came in July of 89, these letters started appearing in August. You have the first letter to Maria Bethlehem in 89, computer generated, allegedly signed by Sister Lucy. But each one of these letters, there's 5 of them, And each one of those letters has falsehoods in the letter. There's complete mistakes that Sister Lucy would never make. And of course, the most famous one today is one we can talk about a little bit. But yes, these letters
the
are
letter from Mr. Nolker, Noelker,
in middle United States.
Generated by a computer. Sister Lucia wrote all of her own letters by hand.
Yes.
She didn't use word processors.
No.
At that time, she was...
In fact, Cardinal Bertoni tells us that she never used a word processor later on. Even though he quotes from this letter from Mr. Nelliker, doesn't tell us that it's a Mr. Nelliker letter, doesn't tell us that, that it's on a computer-generated thing, just as Sister Lucy said in the letter to Mr. Nelliker.
Now, this letter to Mr. Nelliker says that Paul VI, when he was in Fatima, consecrated the world. When in fact he didn't consecrate so much as a tree stump when he was in Fatima. There was no consecration ceremony at all. And Sister Lucia was there, so she could not have made that mistake.
Yes, but that's how you know internally. But apart from that, I mean, our own Father Paul Kramer, got one of these letters after he wrote a letter to Sister Lucy. And we brought that letter to a forensic expert and said, it's not the same person who wrote the memoirs that signed this letter. And so we can prove these things, but there's 5 of these fake letters.
Well, you weren't looking at handwriting; you were looking at syntax.
Well, we're looking also at the signature.
Oh, the signature.
The actual signature was not her signature. So, but from both from the internal criticism of the letters as well as from the signature, you can make out that it was not Sister Lucy. And of course, by 1992, Frère Francois, a Fatima scholar, went to the Bishop of Fatima's conference in October of 1992. We had our conference there also at the same time in another place. But Frère Francois went there and he confronted Father Fox and Father Condor. And he said at the microphone in front of the whole audience of the closing Congress, he said, you, Father Condor, and you, Father Fox, are the authors of these fake letters. I have the proof of that, and I proved it in my writings. I am prepared to discuss and even withdraw my accusation if you can prove me wrong. Both of them got up and left the room without a word. So here they are. They were confronted and accused formally in front of the official Congress they were having there in October 92, and they both wouldn't deny it. Same day or the next day, Frère Francois confronts Father Guerra, Monsignor Guerra, and accuses him of also being one of these authors of these fake letters. And can you swear in the Bible, he says to Monsignor Guerra, can you swear in the Bible that you did not write these letters yourself? I will not do it, says Monsignor Guerra. I will not.
Unbelievable.
It's obviously, Frère Francois had done his homework. He was willing to stand by it. He accused them publicly, and not one of them would deny what he said. I think that those letters should have been dead by that time.
Well, I think what happened is they prepared a letter for her signature, and under obedience, she signed it, or someone else signed it. Either way, it's not really her testimony.
No.
But that brings us...
But these fake letters were all trying to get to say the same thing. The consecration of Russia is done. So what they were trying to get these letters to say, since people wouldn't believe it, because we keep pointing out the facts. Where's the peace? If Russia was consecrated, why wasn't it mentioned? And we over and over again, we went over into great detail about this.
Well, this brings us to a curious character by the name of Carlos Evaristo.
Well, see, when these fake letters didn't do it, when they were completely demolished back in '92, and we had published a lot of Francois' materials, and he did a lot of the original research. We did some of our own research. We published, but after that, those letters were dead. They couldn't prove anything with those letters. They were fakes, and everyone knew it.
So and then we move forward from 1989 or thereabouts to 1992.
Sure.
And by 1992, Sister Lucia is essentially under house arrest.
She's been under house arrest in a way since 1960. She's not allowed to meet anybody unless she's known them before 1960. She's not allowed to. I met her own sister, her blood sister, told me that when she went to visit her sister in the convent, half the convent of nuns were there in the parlor room with Sister Lucy, so she could never say anything private to her own sister.
And she was only allowed to meet with people outside her immediate family with special permission from the Vatican. But lo and behold, in 1992, this obscure fellow named Carlos Evaristo, who apparently has a grade school education.
Yeah, I think he's graduated from grade school. I think that's a diploma on his wall. One of the authors who I think interviewed him saw that.
Suddenly, this fellow manages to get unprecedented access to Sister Lucia, and he emerges, or claims he emerges, from the convent at Coimbra, where Sister Lucia is, and says that on October 11, 1992, he spent 2 hours with Sister Lucia, and he publishes a pamphlet called 2 Hours with Sister Lucy.
Well, but just one of the things we should mention, by the way, present in the room at the same time is Cardinal Padiera from India, Bishop Mikalapa, also from India, and Father Pacheco from Brazil, who speaks Portuguese as well, of course.
He, besides Evaristo, was the only witness in the room who actually spoke Portuguese.
That's right.
Here's what Pacheco said about this 2 hours with Sister Lucy interview. And this is a document he faxed to your apostolate, correct?
Yeah, we published it in the Crusader shortly.
I was the official translator of this meeting, which lasted 2 hours. I categorically affirm that the booklet entitled 2 Hours with Sister Lucy, published by Carlos Evaristo, contains lies and half-truths and is not to be believed. When I was first shown a copy in January 1993, I immediately contacted Carlos Evaristo, and I personally told him not to publish this booklet because of the gross lies that he had put in it. I trust that this will end the confusion caused by Carlos Evaristo and his notorious pamphlet. End quote. Now, what is the purpose of this notorious pamphlet?
Well, one of the things I might just say, though, is that Corey Graham, the editor of the Fatima Crusader, interviewed Carlos when he came back from this meeting with these four men, and she takes shorthand. She's very good at shorthand. She started taking down shorthand, and then she realized he was contradicting himself. And even during this debriefing, a couple of hours after this meeting, both the cardinal and the bishop both told Carlos that he was exaggerating, he was changing, he was distorting or lying. I just forget, but those words are reported in our books. Again, from the very beginning, his testimony was not credible.
Well, he himself had to back down after Father Pacheco said that the pamphlet is not reliable, it's notorious, it's full of lies. Evaristo admitted, and I'm quoting his own admission, and this is from a fax by Evaristo to your apostolate. The dialogue was not recorded at the time. No notes were taken. Although I may have a bad memory, this reconstruction of what was said was not largely made by me. I only typed it. So now he's admitting that he reconstructed the whole thing. It's a fabrication. And
at one point he said that when he wasn't doing something that he was supposed to do, he claimed that the KGB were after him. So maybe some untruth he was talking about, that somehow the KGB got themselves involved and typed this stuff up for him, for all I know. I mean, I just told him what to type.
Well, there's no need to go through it item by item to refute it, because Father Pacheco already says it's not to be believed, and Evaristo admits that it's a fabrication. But this I find interesting. He begins his pamphlet by saying, Carlos Evaristo, who was sitting closest to Sister Lucy and directly in front, held Sister Lucy's hands for most of the 2-hour interview. End quote. Now, here's this obscure fellow, no relation whatsoever to Sister Lucy, goes into a cloistered convent and holds hands with a cloistered nun for 2 hours while
someone
she
she
speaks.
never even met before.
It's laughable.
Yeah.
And this is one of these embellishments that someone who's not telling the truth uses to try to give the appearance of truth to his account, and oftentimes the embellishments undermine the credibility of the account. It's when a lying witness attempts to embellish that problems arise for the witness. But then we see how the false friends of Fatima cooperate in the party line by rewriting the message of Fatima to comply with the party line. No consecration of Russia, and certainly no revelation of the third secret. So in this pamphlet, which Evaristo admits later on was a reconstruction, in which Father Pacheco says is full of lies and is not to be believed, he quotes Sister Lucy, and I'll put that in quotes, concerning the consecration of Russia. Yes, says Sister Lucy, according to Evaristo. Consecration of Russia was partially done. Pope Pius XII made it in 1942. But it lacked union with all the bishops of the world, which John Paul II finally managed to unite in 1984. Evaristo says, so the consecration was then accepted by Our Lady. Sister Lucy, yes. But that's utter nonsense, because the consecration ceremony of 84 was identical in principle to the one in 82 that Sister Lucia had already told the papal nuncio was not sufficient.
Yeah.
Nothing changed.
Yeah.
So why was it now suddenly sufficient? Well, it wasn't.
Well, and
this pamphlet cannot be believed.
And Sister Lucy said in 82, because Russia was not mentioned, was not the clear object of the consecration, as she said, in her 1983 papal nuncio meeting, and also the bishops did not join. And for that matter, where are the bishops in '84 that joined in? I had somebody do a survey of the British bishops. There were 45, more or less 45 British bishops in 1984. And going through them, one might have said a Hail Mary after March 25th was a Sunday. So the Pope was doing the consecration of the world, not Russia, but in Britain, what were they doing? And they were asked, they were invited, not commanded, but invited to join in. Well, one British bishop said a Hail Mary at the bidding prayers after the gospel, after the sermon. So he even counted that as if it was a consecration. So there was only 17 who did anything close to anything like that. What about the other, 27 or whatever it is, 28 of them that did nothing? And that's just one country. So the bishops did not join in. And if saying a Hail Mary constitutes the consecration of the world or Russia, I mean, it's a great thing to say the Hail Mary, to pray the Hail Mary, but it's not the prayer that's being talked about.
Which is why in 1985, in Sol de Fatima magazine, which is the Blue Army's official publication in Spain, Sister Lucia was asked this question. John Paul II invited all the bishops to join in the consecration of Russia, which he was going to make at Fatima on May 13th, 1982, and which he was to renew at the end of the Holy Year in Rome on March 25th, 1984, before the original statue of Our Lady of Fatima. Has he not therefore done what was requested at Tui? Before I give her answer, note that this is a leading question. They're practically begging Sister Lucia to say yes. Oh, remember, Sister Lucy, there was a consecration in 1982, and the Pope was just going to renew it in 1984, and before the original statue of Our Lady of Fatima, there would be this renewal. So really, Sister Lucy, hasn't he done the consecration of Russia? He did it twice, didn't he? He renewed it in '84 after having done it in '82. Here's what she said. There was no participation of all the bishops, and there was no mention of Russia. Question, so the consecration was not done as requested by Our Lady? Sister Lucy, no. Many bishops attached no importance to this act. So even after the 1984 ceremony, she said no to the question whether Russia was consecrated,
and this is
without a mention of Russia.
And this is published even by the Blue Army of all organizations.
The Blue Army's official publication.
In Spain. And
but
so,
according to Evaristo's pamphlet, The Fabrication, by his own admission, he asks her, but does not Russia have to be specifically mentioned? And did not Our Lady say this? Sister Lucy, the Pope's intention was Russia when he said those peoples, because in 1984 he consecrated those peoples who are specifically in need of your consecration, whatever that means. When the Pope said that, said Sister Lucy, God knew the Pope's intention was Russia, and he meant Russia in the consecration. What is important is his intention, like when a priest has the intention to consecrate a host. So now that's very interesting.
Here's the thing.
How does a priest consecrate a host without saying anything?
Well, that's exactly, and the priest has to use the formula that Christ gave us to consecrate the host. He has to actually pronounce the words. It's like consecrating Russia without pronouncing the word Russia.
Yeah, it's like holding up the host and saying, I consecrate this room, because the host is in this room. Yeah. And therefore the host was consecrated. That's how absurd this position is in Evaristo's pamphlet, which purports to be the words of Sister Lucy.
Yeah, and I mean, Lucy's not as dumb as he is, that's for sure.
And so it's the intention of, according to him, the intention of the Pope to consecrate Russia, even though he says nothing about Russia. Well, for that matter, he could have just sat in the papal apartment and think to himself, I intend to consecrate Russia. Oh, there, it's done. Okay. No ceremony needed. So here we see this false friend of Fatima, proclaiming he's held Sister Lucy's hand for 2 hours, coming out of the convent and giving us this
But it's
nonsense.
interesting. How is it that he gets this job? You have pictures
there.
Yeah,
who is he? How did he get access to Sister Lucy?
He's got a picture of himself with Cardinal Sodano. He's got another picture of himself with Cardinal Casaroli. Now, 2 secretaries of state, and they were just transferring the reign from one to the other. Both secretaries of state, both meet Carlos Evaristo, and it's after he meets them that he's gone on this mission, quote-unquote mission, to report with Sister Lucy.
Well, that's curious. So we have photographs of him standing with, of all people in the church, the Secretary of State, 2 different secretaries of state. And then we have, from Evaristo, this unprecedented access to the seer for 2 hours.
But after this, he claims to have gone in again with someone else.
Oh, we'll get to that pamphlet.
Yeah, but all of this stuff, I mean, it's just, and apparently, you know, I mean, so he has this access. he has these friends in high places, and he says what they want them to say, what they want him to say.
Well, one more thing that Evaristo claims. Well, he claims he asked her in this pamphlet, which again he basically concedes is a fabrication. But doesn't Our Lady want Russia to be specifically mentioned? Sister Lucy says, Our Lady never requested that Russia be specifically mentioned by name. Well, she said Russia.
Yeah.
At the time, I didn't even know what Russia was. We thought she was a very wicked woman. What do you think of that claim?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, if the Blessed Virgin comes, when Sister Lucy tells us about many times, the Blessed Virgin told me and my cousins, Lucia and Jacinta, that Russia is the instrument of chastisement to punish the whole world. Now, can one wicked woman punish the whole world? I don't think so. Russia is the instrument of chastisement to punish the whole world unless we obtain beforehand the conversion of that poor nation. And of course, the only way we can obtain the conversion of that poor nation is the consecration of Russia.
Here's the quote. She said that Russia will be the instrument of chastisement chosen by heaven to punish the whole world if we do not beforehand obtain the conversion of that poor nation, not that wicked woman.
Yes.
Well, I guess we're out of time again, but we certainly have a lot more ground to cover in terms of false friends of Fatima. Not only this Evaristo fellow, but a number of other characters in this strange drama.
Yes. But remember that it may seem a little dry or unimportant, but the consecration of Russia will bring peace and prosperity. The non-consecration of Russia will bring about famine and persecution and possibly the reign of Antichrist if we don't get the consecration done in time. It's important for us to realize who is telling the truth. The truth is what counts, and that we have to avoid the lies and the liars, the false friends of Fatima. Remember to pray the Rosary every day so you can find the truth yourself and then live it and pass it on to others.